And I think we've started. No?
Great. Okay, so hello, I am Hope Reese. I am a staff writer for TechRepublic, and that's a division of CBS Interactive. So for the last couple of years, I've been writing about innovations in AI and machine learning and ethical dilemmas raised by new technologies, how automation is impacting the workforce, and other issues related to that. So I'm very happy to be able to moderate this panel. It's a really exciting time for AI, as you all know. We've had all these great innovations happening really at lightning speed. The influx of data has been able to feed these machine learning systems. We've had improvements in compute power, and we've had algorithms, machine learning and deep learning algorithms that have been able to kind of exceed expectations. So today's panel is about the renaissance in AI, trends of machine learning, machine tasks versus human tasks, and what could happen if machines become smarter than humans. So I'm going to briefly introduce the panelists today. I'll just go around and they'll give a little bit more of an introduction afterwards, and then we'll just get into the questions. So let's see. We have Anthony. His webcam is not on. Anthony Gadient, President and CEO of Voci Technologies, and that's a company that develops speech analytics solutions. It relies on machine learning, and Anthony has expertise in the area of machine learning and customer service. We also have Daniel Hulme, CEO of Satalia, which is an AI company that builds systems for companies to run on. He also says it's grounded in deep psychological and philosophical theory, which I hope he will elaborate on a little more during our talk. We have George Hemingway. George is the partner and head of innovation at Stratalis Consulting. He's an advisor to global 100 companies on the future of industry, uncertainty, and digital transformation. And he helps companies better understand the future and how they can grow during this tumultuous and uncertain times. And then finally, we have Clyde Logue. Clyde is the VP of Products at Glance. Glance is a visual engagement platform that helps people connect on multiple devices. There's a heavy focus on the customer experience, and it's geared towards business professionals. So we heard earlier that, we know that all these companies, if they aren't using AI already, 45% want to use it in the next 5 years. It's a huge opportunity. And there are all these benefits of using AI, especially in customer service. It can personalize interactions. You can process insights. It can save your company a lot of money. So I'm really interested to hear specifically what kind of expertise our panelists have on how companies can embrace this. So I will just get started with the first question, and we'll go around, and then the panelists will give a little more background about themselves. But we'll start with just to kind of set the stage about what has happened in the last couple of years that have made this time right now really ripe for integrating AI. Why are machines suddenly able to kind of automate tasks that were previously kind of cognitive tasks that required a different kind of level of knowledge and skill. So I will start let's start with going to Anthony, who's on the audio. Anthony, do you want to talk about this issue a little bit, and then we'll go
Sure.
around?
So I guess there's a little bit of additional background. As Hope noted, my company is Voci Technologies. Voci is an Italian word meaning voices. It also happens to be the acronym for Voice of the Customer Insights, which is by design. Our mission at Voci is to enable enterprises to extract actionable intelligence from their voice data. So To accomplish that mission, we are really focused on delivering the world's best speech analytics platform. I personally have been working in artificial intelligence for over 30 years and have thus seen a pretty significant evolution of what is meant by AI. You know, in the early days it was expert systems that helped to configure computers. Today it's neural networks and deep learning that are part of the solutions we deliver at Voci that are specifically designed to allow a computer to hear. And I think it's, you know, that combination of technologies, the deep learning, machine learning, neural networks that have made, at least in our industry, a substantive difference in terms of the algorithms that we can deploy and how effective those algorithms are, you know, in achieving the mission of helping organizations extract that information out of their voice data.
Okay, great. And let's just go around. Clyde, can you go ahead?
Sure. As you mentioned, Glance Networks is focused on the customer experience and enabling companies to connect with their customers on any device. And so we're really beginning a journey to employ AI, you know, in our product suite. So I'd say, you know, we've been following the industry for many years and know a lot about it, you know, but now we're starting to really like weave it into our product offering. So it's interesting the way that AI can start to enable a better customer experience even before they get on the phone with an agent, before they connect, and enabling that entire
The leader has
process
disconnected.
to be, you know,
The
lower
conference will be
friction.
terminated in 2 minutes.
What was that? Yeah.
I don't know whether you guys heard that message. I don't know. That may not be good,
Canceled.
but I'll just continue. So we're working, you know, with a number of partners to bring AI to our product suite. So for us, I think it's a way to enable our customers to be more successful in providing support to their customers. But I'll just say, you know, one of the things that it seems that makes AI work is having a lot of data, and having a lot of processing power. So both the rise of utility computing, you know, through Amazon, and the rise of big data has enabled AI, you know, in our perspective, to actually start to bear the fruit that we've all thought it had the potential to deliver over the years.
Thank you. George, do you want to go next?
Sure. Thanks for the introduction. So very briefly, I run the innovation practice for Stratalis. We help some of the world's leading companies to think about the future, to understand technology and artificial intelligence, and to understand the impact of these emerging technologies on their business models, on their operating models, and their organizational models. So to your question, you know, I think all the panelists will touch on the more technological point of view, that the emergence of data and better computing power and algorithms and the like have allowed these sorts of technologies to emerge. But what I think is as interesting, or from at least our perspective, more interesting, is that from the point of view of the companies and the suppliers that supply these companies, they're finding themselves bogged down by information. They're finding themselves bogged down by the complexity of their businesses. And they're facing a number of challenges in terms of labor markets, in terms of how to better collaborate with suppliers, in terms of...
And what did you mean about
by the way, open.
Oh, good.
Hopefully you guys
about
can hear me.
the kind of psychological component that
I think Daniel did a nice job, actually, of putting it in a different way that actually sort of answers the question. But just to finish the sentence, you know, what we're seeing is a lot of complexity in trying to serve a broadening customer base, especially enabled by all of these digital technologies, and especially when you're attempting to no longer on a one-to-one human basis interact with customers, but interact globally with a much larger set of customers, things get pretty complex. And so what you're seeing is a lot of investment on the part of industry in artificial intelligence. The technology aside, that investment is driving a lot of the change, and that's sort of what's made this also possible.
Mm-hmm. So I wonder too, we're talking about this renaissance in AI, and when you are working with a few of you working with companies that kind of are struggling to implement AI or understand AI, are there ways that you can help businesses, organizations kind of boil down what AI is capable of, what it isn't, how kind of humans and AI can work together? I know that's kind of broad, but there are so many challenges. So I'm wondering if you could kind of start, like, what are the big obstacles, and what are the ways to kind of suss out, here's what AI, can do, and here's kind of what it can't.
Well, I think
I'll start with,
I was going to say that
sorry.
Looking at it from our perspective at Voci, kind of when you go back to the idea of getting a computer to hear, machines can't hear as well as humans. The human ear is still a more complex biological system than we've been able to replicate in a computer. On the other hand, a human can listen to, an hour of conversation, an hour, maybe a little bit more if you speed it up. A computer can listen to, one of our computers can listen to 1 million hours of audio in a year. And that's in, a 1U kind of form factor. So your ability to take that big data, digest it into something that is distilled, is, I think, one of the benefits that the technology brings. There are some specific things that we see specifically where the machine does better than human. An example of that is the ability to recognize a speaker. So you may have heard of voice biometrics. It basically is a technique to sort of take a voice fingerprint, if you will, of a person, and then to be able to recognize that person in other contexts, whether they're speaking a different language, on a phone versus on a cell phone and so forth. We find that the machine is far more accurate and also able to work, orders of magnitude faster than humans in that particular task. And what that means is that you now have the opportunity to deploy solutions that are able to match a person to potentially their personality, and to then route conversations with matching personalities, so that you end up with a richer interaction that benefits both the company as well as the consumer.
Mm-hmm. George, do you want to, were you trying to say something earlier, or?
No, I was listening. It's fascinating,
okay.
matching people based on their personality. But if you'd like, I'm happy to answer the question that you asked.
Yeah. Let's just, go ahead.
Okay, sure. And I apologize if I interrupted in some way. That was unintentional.
Oh, no, you didn't.
One of the funny things about two thoughts, and we have faced the same challenge when it comes to automation and when it comes to digital as we do to artificial intelligence. The first is that it's important to recognize that AI is at a very nascent stage, and it means a lot of different things to different people. And like innovation, like digital, it's not something that's really well understood by the layperson. In fact, I would argue it's not something that's well understood by the people that spend their time doing it in terms of having a shared understanding of what the heck artificial intelligence is. But what we find, and right now, for example, I'm doing this with a financial services company, is that instead of focusing so much on the technology, and I know that's sort of a taboo thing to say in a conference about technology, it's about focusing a little bit on what the heck you want the technology to do. So if you're attempting to serve your customers better, if you're attempting to create some sort of advantage, understand where value is going to come from in the future, what the customer wants, and then ask the question of, okay, what are the technologies, as well as artificial intelligence, that would allow that to happen? I think when you take that perspective with businesses, it helps them to understand it better because they understand their customers. They understand the decisions they need to make. They understand the value they need to deliver. Then it becomes a question of how you use the technology to do that. Whereas when you focus on the technology alone, you basically end up speaking to only the people that have some semblance of understanding of the technology. And that usually doesn't translate into an ability to communicate that throughout the organization. There you go.
Yeah, that's great. And that's something I hear a lot too from businesses, or one of the challenges is kind of hearing about AI, knowing that they need to bring AI into the company, but thinking of it kind of in a backwards way instead of like, how can we have this issue? How can AI help it? You know, instead of just how can we bring in an AI company that will, you know, make something, you know, just transform our business into a, you know, a higher tech kind of version of itself. So yeah, Clyde. Yeah.
Right. I would, yeah, sure. I would say that, you know, the thing that maybe perhaps a number of companies struggle with, they know that they have something they want to automate or they want to improve with AI, but they need to gather the data sets to train the AI, you know, to give it enough content that it can start to make observations that are meaningful and then tune that process. And just gathering the data, even in the era of big data, even in the era of, you know, obviously availability of processing power, but just cleansing the data to the point where it is useful enough and specific enough that you could start to train against it. That's been a challenge for a lot of customers. And I think that's why, you know, folks like us who have, you know, defined sets of data, you know, that we already have feeds for, start to become valuable players in that space as a large customer wants to solve a customer, you know, satisfaction relationship or a customer experience problem. They start to look, where's the data coming from? Who has the data that can help me solve that problem? And that's the first step. And then we start to talk about, you know, implementing the algorithms and the deep learning to really gain some insights and start to improve that process. Then there's, you know, you got the insights from the system, but now it's taking action. And that's the other part. The emergent actions that come out of AI systems are not always predictable, right, to anyone who's programming these things, or at least getting them starting and getting them up and running. So that's a challenge, is how do I know what's going to happen with my customer? So there's some trepidation on the side of, you know, customer support and customer relationship management people about what the AI is actually going to do for them.
That's really helpful. And also, so a lot of the people in this conference are in the finance industry. I'm wondering, and customer service and others, but I'm wondering if any of you, and maybe we can go to Daniel next, like have specific examples of a problem that, you know, you can solve with AI, like something from your experience, something that has been challenging for companies or organizations that can kind of illustrate what we're talking about in a more specific way for. Okay. Anthony, do you want to weigh in on that as well?
Yeah.
I know you're down there.
Yeah.
We can't see.
I guess when you look at customer experience, particularly in the financial arena, you know, the technologies that, you know, we bring and that others, I think, on this call, you know, provide are very important in terms of that process. You know, the ability to take large amounts of data, use that data to understand kind of the propensity for somebody, for example, to close, you know, shut down their credit card account, is information that's continuously changing, and the relationship between behaviors and outcomes is changing. So, you know, that kind of an application is by definition sort of adaptive to the continuously changing environment. But that knowledge of who might have that propensity to churn is very powerful. And, you know, to build an accurately predictive churn model is something that I don't think could be done effectively without the kinds of technologies that we're referring to today. We've worked with you know, several organizations that have built, and we've helped them build these kinds of models, and, you know, they have the ability to predict with greater than, you know, 90% accuracy, you know, who is kind of in that potential mode, and then that, knowing that, you know, they have the ability to try to affect the outcome and change the person's, you know, attitude about the company by effectively improving the experience that they're having, because the reason somebody's going to want to close their account is because they're not satisfied.
Right. Yeah, so that's a great point. So yeah, what are the ways that AI can really help improve kind of customer interactions, especially in finance? If Can we talk about that a little bit? Maybe Clyde or
Sure. I mean, I think if you have in finance, obviously there's a transaction, usually that it's associated with a customer relationship. Maybe it's a series of transactions. So you want to make sure that you're monitoring, as I think it was Anthony was saying, you're monitoring the success of that customer, whether they're churning is one of the metrics. And so as you create that customer relationship, there's also a cost side of it, right? So, or you manage that customer relationship. So you give people, and there's a push now for more customized customer relationships. And so you're trying to segment your customer base. You're trying to provide them the right level of service and the right level of cost that makes sense for your organization. So there's a push to automate those experiences as much as possible. We've certainly been probably called by robots. There's even certainly the robot chat. And so people are looking for fast, service in each of those segments, and the companies want to provide that service as cheaply as possible. So the key here is, supervision of the action with the customers, right? So taking the data, understanding where a customer's at, meeting them where they're at, and then trying to solve their problem as quickly as possible so that they remain a happy and loyal customer. And that's why, there are a variety of different customer satisfaction statistics. But at the end of the day, if you're really in trouble, you kind of want to get a real person on the phone and talk with them. But if you can reduce that and you can keep the skill level of those people who eventually get on the phone with a customer at the highest level, then you've kind of won that. You've properly deployed those resources, at the point where they could be most helpful. And then hopefully there's a feedback loop there, as I think we were talking about, the adaptive part, so that each time you put somebody through that process, themselves trying to solve the problem, then contacting chat, then ultimately getting on a call, you learn what happened, what may have happened. You have better analytics. Hopefully you're applying AI to that, and you're getting some ability to tweak that process, the customer's journey, making it better for customers so that they don't call as often.
Yeah, that point about kind of having a human at the end of the line is important. So maybe I'll ask George about this. When you're looking, when companies are looking at their employees and their workforce, what's a smart way to kind of try to suss out, what's the line, like up to, at what point can, things no longer be automated but need to transition to a human employee, or kind of how do employees work well together with automated systems?
Oh boy, you didn't ask a simple question there, right? Let me answer that question in part by discussing the last one,
Okay.
because I think you were talking, and we'll use financial services as an example, if you will. There's two parts to that. The first is that one of the things that AI, or at least the evolution of what we think it's going to look like, doesn't do particularly well, is interact, one could argue, with other humans in a collaborative way. And this is sort of the holy grail, but the truth is that when it comes to dealing with humans, especially inside a company, humans want to deal with other humans. And the irony, of course, is that what companies want to do is they want to, as much as possible, get the computers and get the technology to deal with humans cheaply. So you've got this sort of conundrum, and it's a conundrum, that financial services in particular is facing, because as we look at, what a lot of our clients are doing, trying to look at robo-advisors and how do you segment customers and find a way to service the least valuable ones in the most efficient way and the most valuable ones in this sort of combination of robotics and human beings, you realize that at the end of the day, unless everybody does it at the same time, you risk alienating a huge chunk of your customer base, because a human being is, generally speaking, going to do a better job of interacting with another human being than a computer will. In fact, I do my best, I don't know about the rest of you, of hitting 0 and pound anytime that I call my credit card company, just to make sure I'm not dealing with a computer. So this is one of the fundamental challenges. But when you look at the real impact of this, which isn't just on the customer base, but it's how we work as companies, how we organize, whether or not we choose to automate entire industries. Look at the mining industry, which is an industry that by its very nature is attempting to get people outside of its operating structure, because you just don't want people underground where things collapse and things blow up, and all sorts of fun stuff that goes on in mining. When you look at that, and you look at an industry that's desperately pushing into automation, desperately pushing into artificial intelligence as quickly as they feasibly can, you realize that you cannot, even if you want to, fully automate quickly. And the reason is because there is a social contract, a duty, if you will, to your employees, to the communities around you, to society at large, not to, even if you can, flick the switch. You know, whether we're talking mining or financial services, the same thing. I've got a client in financial services that is probably the largest bank in its particular country. And even though they could cut a lot of people by doing automation and artificial intelligence and the like, this types of transformation, they explicitly have said, we don't want to. We want to find a way, because we owe it to our people and our country and our industry, to do this in an ethical way. So again, sometimes it's not so much about what you can do, but what you will be allowed to do, what will be accepted, and what you're willing to do to balance out the transformation with your societal obligations. And that's a real thing that mining, financial services, retail, we're seeing.
Thank you. I'm going to switch back to another question. Hang on a quick second. I'm interested in kind of how companies can train employees along these lines to work well with AI and automation. I'm wondering if Anthony, if we could go to you for that one, kind of along the same lines of how to think of your employee base, but specifically in the kind of training area.
That's an interesting question. You know, the industries that we support involved a number of call center sorts of activities, and the turnover within call centers tends to be very high. You know, 30-40% per year will often end up leaving the job and need to be replaced. So training is essential. I think that from what we see, you know, AI provides, or at least AI-enabled assistants provide the ability to enhance that learning curve so that they become productive faster, because they don't have to have all of the knowledge in their head. Some of that knowledge can be encapsulated in a smart assistant that's kind of participating in the interactions that are occurring with a client. The other things that we see are that you know, that training process is a continuous learning process, and the way that the agent is able to learn from their experience is to identify those interactions which are particularly meaningful from a learning perspective. And if an agent has, you know, might be on the telephone, you know, 50 times during a day and hundreds of times during a week, finding those specific examples of calls that are going to benefit that learning process is very important. And that's where, you know, technology like we provide and the AI that's encapsulated there, you know, supports that process. So from where we sit, it's kind of a two-pronged approach. One is helping the person learn more effectively by providing that information that, you know, represents the ideal examples of learning opportunities, and the other is the marrying of the artificial intelligent assistant, if you will, with the agent so that they don't have to come up that learning curve on their own.
Okay. Daniel, could you talk about that a little bit as well, just the kind of concept of training the workforce, or, you know, employers retraining people for jobs in AI and automation? Clyde, do you want to answer that question as well, or do you have?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think I would agree. I mean, I think it's you know, it's hard for certain types of organizations and to staff their own groups for this, and it depends on the scale you have. And I think it comes back to the data too. If you're a small organization, if you're less sexy, as Daniel was saying, you may or may not have the data in the right format that you need to start using AI directly without a fair amount of data cleansing and data integration work. So I think it's key to just keep remembering that it's all about you've got to have data to really implement an AI strategy like the ones we're talking about. So I've been in a lot of organizations, even a lot of IT shops. You'd think they were data rich, and they are, but the data is captured in various discrete systems that make it very difficult to normalize and then gain insight about the nature of your IT delivery system. So it's a challenge that I think a lot of customers will continue to have, and there's probably going to be sub segments of this industry that grow up around aggregating the data required for an AI strategy.
George, did you want to talk about that as well? What you've seen there?
Well, I'm still stuck in my head trying to figure out how I put the sexy industry to difficult problem matrix into one of my PowerPoint slides for my next client. I think it's great. And working in industries that are both attractive and not, from the range of mining to biotech, I can see Daniel has an interesting point. It's fascinating. This is why you're seeing collaborations with the IBMs and the GEs of the world combined with hackathons in the mining industry to create a little bit of sexiness around the challenges. But to answer your original question, when it looks at training, when it looks at employees and interacting with artificial intelligence, I think one of the challenges is that people and companies try to stick automation and try to stick these new intelligent systems in their old processes. And they don't think about, okay, given where I want to go in the future with my customers or my business, where do I actually need people? And where can I actually use these types of artificial intelligence systems? And so what you're seeing is when people think about this in a more holistic way, what they're doing is they're realizing that one of the things that automation and artificial intelligence allows is it allows you to run by exceptions, which means the computer, the technology essentially automates the tasks, whether they're physical or customer-based tasks. And only when something goes wrong, only when the customer says, I can't solve this problem, or only when the machine says, hey, I'm not able to move at the pace I need to move, do these humans get involved. And so it's not about trying to necessarily retrain people on everything, as it is so much on training people how to get involved when exceptions occur. And if you narrow down that particular focus, you find that humans have a different role. You don't need to necessarily retrain them on how to use artificial intelligence so much as you need to help them understand, what do I do when things go wrong, or when a human being could do the job better. And I think that's what we're seeing a little bit more, where companies are thinking a little more future focused than simply trying to optimize what they've already got.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder too, with, we've got these major we've talked a lot about data and the importance of data in machine learning. And some of the big companies, Google and Amazon, they have this benefit of like huge amount of kind of customer data. How do smaller companies or startups or companies that are interested in getting into AI, how do they handle, like what are the kind of, are they at a disadvantage when it comes to kind of data that can be used in developing their own kind of customer service or that kind of thing? Do any of you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, I'll jump in.
All right, Anthony.
I can say that being a sort of a late stage startup, we've kind of gone through that whole experience. And back to the comment that was made earlier that these organizations have tons of data in siloed systems that they aren't able sometimes to get access to. It's kind of funny, even though it's their data, some companies will implement an IT system and not give access to the data that's in their system to their customer, which is rather peculiar. But what we've found is that the enlightened companies that we work with recognize the importance of data and the desire to put together sort of best-in-class solutions where they need to work with leading companies such as Voci and enable us to do what we do so well by helping us with data. And we've had very large companies that have been able to give us large volumes of data that help to improve my system. But it is the case that it's a challenge, and it's a challenge from a number of facets. Getting access to the data, given PCI, PII sorts of considerations. The EU has certain restrictions about data leaving the EU, so it means that you need to set up a sort of a machine learning environment within that geography. All of those things are challenges, but they're opportunities once you have access to that information.
So we are in our kind of final stages here, so we're going to go back to each of the panelists if you want to answer that question, or if you want to give another kind of final takeaway for the audience about kind of what this renaissance in AI means for companies. I'll let Clyde go ahead with that.
Sure. I mean, I would just echo, I mean, the potential is huge, right? I mean, you could really improve your customer experience, but the implementation, as George was saying, you've got to like really start with the process. You've got to start with your end goal and process. And it may not be where you initially thought it was. I mean, you might think, I want to reduce my, per call time, in my call center, but it might be you just want to have better quality calls. You want to have perhaps longer calls that allow you to sell more or close more business instead of just trying to, get the customer off the phone. So those types of things, if you can employ an AI strategy that supports that, business goal and is, specific enough about the data you need to achieve those goals, whether it be voice data or online user browsing path data, or even recording that experience that you're having with your customer service rep, any of those types of things that will help you get to where you want to be. That's where we're looking for AI to help out and bring those data sources together and create an actionable insight that your teams can start to employ. And I think key to that also is making sure that you don't lose the human component. So somebody's got to be watching what is happening. So maybe the reporting on what the AI has been doing is pretty critical. It's almost like you need monitoring and process for your AI system.
That's a great point.
So that's
Thanks.
it for me.
George, do you want to go ahead on that?
Sure. I mean, I think sort of, to wrap up my thoughts is that, when it comes to artificial intelligence, automation, all these technologies, I think the key really is to start by forgetting the technology for a minute and ask, as Clyde said, what is it you're looking to achieve? What's your vision of the future? And then ask the question, now how am I going to define the role for artificial intelligence, automation with that in a very distinct way that helps me to provide a better service for my customers? And that may mean reinventing the way you operate. It may mean reinventing the way you look at your business model. And at the end of the day, no automation, no artificial intelligence is going to fix a broken business model. No matter what Blockbuster did, it couldn't compete against Netflix because it had all those retail stores and it survived by charging late fees. And, you can get rid of the late fees, suddenly, boom, the whole thing collapses. No matter what banks do, if Amazon decides to compete in financial services, there's nothing they're going to be able to do to compete with the fact that they have retail branches, and those retail branches and employees have a cost structure to it. So you've got to ask yourself the question, if I'm going to go ahead and compete with players that have amazing data, that have the ability to customize solutions, that aren't constrained by the same operating or business model I have, what do I need to look like? And how do I use artificial intelligence and automation and the rest to sort of get there? And if you start from that point of view and not the technology, I think it's helpful.
Great. And Daniel, we'll end on you. Just have a couple of minutes, but any final thoughts and answers to what we talked about? Yep. And also there's some issues with over relying on human judgments, right? Because humans are fallible. And okay, so I guess we just have one more minute. So I'll just say a big thank you. It's a really exciting time we're in, and thank you to all the panelists for joining the conference. It's nice to meet
Thank you.
and I hope the audience got something out of it. So thanks a lot, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the conference.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.